Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. You're joining a short webinar about finding success with your job search. Most of you signed up to join this seminar from when you applied for a job posting, and ComSteady International, which was the company that was recruiting for this position, reached out and say, hey, could you give some feedback to these applicants to help them on their job search? So that's why we're here today. Some of the things that I'm going to talk about today are statistics and some feedback, some observations from the process. And in my email, I told you who I am, but my team helped ComSteady International find a candidate for an opening they had. So I had the chance to review a lot of the data from my team. So just want to share some of that data with you, give you some ideas of how you could continue to improve your chances of landing a job. So just starting off with the numbers from this particular job search process. So there were over 800 people that applied. And 800, first of all, the job was posted in Ghana. The job is located in Ghana. The position was listed in Ghana. It got on the internet and it traveled far. So there were applications from Ghana, Zimbabwe, Kenya, Uganda, probably about 6 different countries. So a total of 800 plus people applied for the job. There was only one job. And of the 800 plus people, 622 people completed the survey. Now, the survey was sent out as a way to screen, because when you apply for a job, companies always have a way of screening because they can't hire everybody that applies. So sometimes they will use a computer system to screen. Sometimes they will ask you to take a test. Sometimes they would ask you to write an essay. There are various things companies do to screen out. Now, as you could tell, about 200 people decided not to complete the survey. So automatically, they eliminated themselves from the process. You should take every step in the process seriously. Out of the 622 people that completed a survey, based on the criteria provided by the company, 15 people were shortlisted for a virtual interview. Again, the company cannot bring in everybody in for a face-to-face interview, so they'll strike the number down and bring in some people for a virtual interview to try to find out if people are going to be fit and ready for the job. So out of the 15 people, 3 people were invited for an in-person interview. And out of the 3, 1 person was hired. So the lesson here, the key point that I want you to take with you is it starts with a large number. Everybody submits themselves for selection, but the number gets smaller over the course of the process. So these are things that you want to keep in mind as you apply for a job, because it helps you understand the landscape so you could put yourself in the best position. So some observations that our team made as we reviewed applications and selected people for the various stages of the process. We realized that there are many highly qualified applicants, lots of people. The position asks for 1 year experience, but there are people with 2, 3, and they are all looking for the same job. People are employed looking for that same job, people unemployed looking for that same job. But you would realize that for a marketing and administrative assistant position, you would need good communication skills. And there were different levels of communication skills, some great, some okay, and some not good at all. Communication skills are important on the job and on the process. And I'll talk about some specific things that you could look at to improve how you present yourself communications-wise. We also recognize that the resumes, as far as the appearance shows, there were some good resumes, there are some bad resumes, and there are also some very ugly resumes. And when you look at your resume, you will know where you fit. You would most likely know where you fit on the spectrum of things. You should be honest with yourself, look at your resume and determine if your resume is good, if it's bad or ugly in terms of how it's presented. Just simple things like how you organize information, how long the information is, how easy it is for somebody to read it. That's important. Also with resumes, we realize that the content, sometimes the relevance is different, the volume and the structure of the resume, it matters because if you're applying for a job and you're listing things on the resume that has no relevance to what the job is asking for, you're not putting yourself in the best position. And then the structure. Sometimes people have things on their resume that it's obvious that they haven't thought about. They just put things on their resume because that's how they've always done it and they are not paying attention. So sharing these observations, I'll give some feedback on specific things that you could do, and then I'll open it up for you to ask questions. Cover letters. Some people had no cover letters. Some people had cover letters that's just right. And some people had too much in their cover letters. And I would suggest that you stick with what's just right. And we could talk some more about that. But excessive sometimes gets in the way of the recruiter getting to the important thing, your resume. Interviewing, virtual and in person. I mentioned this earlier on. The interview is either virtual or in person, and either time you need to show up ready. You need to show up putting your best foot forward. You need to present yourself like you will present yourself if you had the job, if and when you had the job. We'll talk some more about that. Thank you. Saying thank you. I have interviewed a lot of people for this job and for other jobs. One of the things that I find very lacking, which you should pay attention to, is people saying thank you after the interview. People will come in for an interview, they will go, they even will take your business card and not even bother to send an email saying, Mr. So-and-so, thank you for making the time to meet with me, and I look forward to hearing from you. Something just that simple. Very, very well-meaning people, smart people, very qualified people forget to do that. And if there are two people looking for the same job, both equally qualified, guess who will stay on the interviewer's mind if both of you are equally qualified and then they have to pick just one? I think the person who sends a thank you note may have a slight edge. And again, LinkedIn profile. If you get selected for an in-person interview, you can be sure that the company will look at your LinkedIn profile. And if your LinkedIn profile didn't match your resume, that could imply that you're not paying attention to detail. A lot of people say, oh, one of my strengths is attention to detail. Well, that's one place you want to demonstrate that attention to detail, making sure that your profile on LinkedIn is consistent with your resume. Now, a few thoughts for you to keep in mind. If you're taking notes, you could take notes here, but things to increase your chances. I started off by showing how many people applied, how many people were down in the various stages of the process up until the final person was hired. It's a numbers game. It's a lot of people. Many of you are very qualified, very capable, smart, but you may not get picked because there are only so many opportunities available. But in order for you to put yourself in a good place to be picked, you got to put your best foot forward. You have to show up like this is the most important thing for you. It's a numbers game. It's not going to be you if you're not the most ready. And that's something that you need to keep in mind as you try to increase your chances of success. And speaking of putting your best foot forward, you ought to present your best looking resume. There is a feature, there is a tool online. It's called Resume Genius. Now, Resume Genius is a thing, it's like AI type of thing. You could submit your resume to it and it could reformat it for it to look cleaner. Now, it's important for you to think about what's going on in your resume before you submit it to Resume Genius, because if you haven't thought about some of the things that I'm talking about on here, as in making sure the information is relevant, things are organized properly, it might look pretty, but it probably might just be polish over dirt if you don't take the time to make it look good. But check out Resume Genius to see if that could help your resume look better. And then I talked about content. Listen, your resume could look pretty. It could look super pretty. But if the content doesn't reflect the job you're applying for, employers are going to look at it and go, yeah, this is a nice person, but that's not who we need. It's important for you to pause for a minute to think about, what are they asking for? What do they need for this job before you submit your resume. Some people have the same resume and they will push it out for any job they see. They don't even pause to think, have I looked at my resume to see if it reflects the job posting? If you don't do that, you might miss an opportunity just because you didn't pay enough attention to what they're asking for. Cover letters, you got to be strategic. A cover letter is just saying, here's my resume, here's why I applied for the job, please look at my resume. Sometimes you might need to call out something specific that explains or tell the person or the employer what to look for. You don't need to write a whole 5-10 paragraph letter talking about everything that's in the resume already. It's a waste of the recruiter's time. Be strategic. Why are you including the cover letter? Maybe you just need to say, hey, look at my resume, it's attached, I'm interested in the job, please consider me. That's brief and that's enough. Interviewing, it starts earlier than you think. The way you show up, by how you even send your letter in, your resume in, how your resume looks, that's part of the interview. Your interview doesn't start after you've been picked. Your interview starts from the first time your interviewer sees your resume. So put your best foot forward, because interviewing starts way earlier than you think. And please, please send a thank you email. Do that. Do that. It just shows that you're polite. It just shows that you're cultured. It just shows that you appreciate the person's time engaging with you in hopes of giving you a job. And whilst you wait to find a job, keep learning, keep reading. For those of you who made it on this call, kudos to you. You are investing in yourself and you're finding ways to continue to develop. And then serve. Find a way to use your skills to help other people. Don't just sit and keep your hands in your lap and saying, I'm waiting for a job before I do something. How are you going to practice skills? How are you going to use that to help solve problems? All right. So at this point, I'm going to open it up and have you guys ask questions that may be on your mind. And then I'll come back and give some closing thoughts, and then we can wrap up. Any questions on what I've shared so far? Christabel, go ahead.
Is volunteering good enough to put on your resume? Say maybe you are volunteering in the positions for the job, but it's not an actual job. Is that something that you could state in your resume?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, your resume is telling a prospective employer the skills that you're bringing and how you're going to add value to the organization. And sometimes that skill or that experience came about as a result of doing something that you are not being paid for. That's volunteering. So if you have experience doing something as a volunteer, you should put it on your resume. But don't put it on your resume just to fill up space. You want to call out, what did you do there and what skills that gave you. So sometimes people will list, I volunteered, head of their community youth group. Well, that's good. But if there are things you did in head of the community group, say you planned meetings, you managed communication for the organization, you did this and did that, it's helpful to call that out, especially if you have the experience, enough experience, or you think it will be a plus. Call it out and don't just list it on there. So yes, volunteering, absolutely. It also shows that you are helpful, you're helpful, helping community, and it definitely speaks well of you. All right, William Beza has a comment. If the volunteering experience that I have does not relate to the job I'm applying for, should I still appear on my CV? You have to think about it. Why are you putting it on your CV? That's a question you have to ask. Why are you putting on there? If you think it has nothing to do with the job, what are you going to put on there? So let me even go back to an earlier point that I was thinking about, didn't get the chance to share yet. How long your resume or CV should be. Some people's CV were as many as 4 pages or 5 pages. And a lot of that information, the person reviewing the resume is not going to look that far to go look at that 4th page, to look at that resume, that volunteering experience. So it may not be important. If you would listen to me, my best advice is, especially whilst you are early in your career, you got to be thoughtful and cut down your resume to 1 page. If you cannot be concise and make it 1 page, there's a chance that you're putting on things that doesn't relate to the job. If you're limited to 1 page, you will ask yourself, I have 7 volunteering experiences. Which are the ones that are the most relevant to put on here? You would modify your resume at different times to be able to make it fit what you're looking for. So there might be a resume that has experiences that are good but not relevant. And you think about it, you look at it and say, how do I make the most use of this 1 page and put on there things that matter the most? All right. I'm going to share some additional tips, some things to keep in mind when you're going for interviews. All right. I honestly think most of you are very qualified. You should be able to get jobs, but you got to put in some work. You got to put in some work to polish yourself. You got to put in some work to develop yourself, and you got to show up ready to get that job, because trust me, employers are good. Well, I wouldn't say that for every employer, but most employers are good in feeling out whether the person is right for the job. And think about it. It's a waste of their time if they hire somebody who is not the right person for the job, if they hire somebody who just wants a job and is not looking for a career. And so they need to put in all that work to make sure that the person that they bring in is ready and will want to stay there with them for a good length of time. A few things that I want you to keep in mind as I'm talking about, I want to share some things about interviews, and I just want to share a few thoughts here. When you're in for an interview is a two-way conversation. An interview is not just you sitting there and the interviewer just asking you a bunch of questions. You should go over there ready to have an exchange to see if you're a good fit for each other. If that's a company you want to work for, that's a job you want to do. So you have to come ready with questions to ask, questions to help you make that determination. Research, practice, and prepare. Even if you don't know about the company, do everything you can. Ask questions, get on the internet, ask the interviewer before you go in for an interview. What's the company? What do they do? If they don't share that information, just have a general idea based on the job description and prepare. Think of questions and show up. There is no substitute for preparation. If you don't prepare, you're going to show up and you might find out that you just sold yourself short. And when you're in an interview, it's not just a question and answer. It's a story. It's a storytelling thing. People remember stories more than they remember just facts. So be prepared to talk about, for example, in that volunteering experience, what did you do? What did you learn? What problems did you solve? Things like that helps the leader, the interviewer, or the employer know how you think and how you will solve problems when you get into their environment. And when you're in an interview, don't make it just you talking. Listen. You got to listen so that you know what questions are being asked. so you don't talk and keep talking and keep talking and just rambling on, or miss cues. They may ask questions to try to get certain answers from you, but if you're not paying attention, you might miss the cues. And you speak confidently and also listen with care. Another important thing to think about with interviews, which is what I implied in my earlier comment, that the interview starts sooner than you think. How you present yourself on the internet matters. The brand, how you present yourself, it matters. How you comment on articles on the internet, it matters. What kind of pictures of yourself you put on the internet, it matters. The brand that you project will make a company decide whether or not they want to associate with you. So definitely going to highly encourage you to mind your brand, how you present yourself on the internet. Now, one more thing I want to talk about again, as you continue with your job search, which I believe is one step in a long career, is to think about this word. This word I have on the screen. It means different things to different people, but a simple way that I encourage you to think about it is, why are you here, right? Why do you want a job? Why did you get an education? Why do you have the skills that you have? Like, what are you trying to do? Are you just trying to get a job so you could pay bills? That means the next job that gives you more money, you're just going to jump, whether the job is useful or not. But two things I want you to think about, two questions I want you to answer in trying to help you understand more about purpose, what your purpose is and how purpose fits into your life's work, is to, one, make a list of all the different skills that you have. Make a list of the skills. I can write, I can paint, I like solving problems. Just make a list. Just make a list. Don't edit yourself. Just make this long list and look at these things. Take a look at them and try to figure out which are the ones that are strongest for you, and bring out probably about the top 3. Sit with it. Sit with it. And then ask yourself the second question: how do I help people? Or how do I want to help people? Because ultimately, your purpose should be grounded in how you help people. So if you're going to work with a company, the job you're getting, your question that you should be answering yourself is, how is what you're doing going to help people? Either people you work with or people that the company serves. Again, if you could ground yourself in purpose, and purpose is something that you're going to keep thinking about, keep working on, it would bring you back to a place of peace about the job that you have, and you don't go into a job worrying as much about how much you make or some of the things that could change very quickly, but you get yourself grounded in something that gives you meaning and, in the work that you do. So I want to wrap it up over here. If there are any questions, I'll answer them. But if there are no questions, we will wrap it up and bring it to a close. All right, Christabel.
Okay, it's not a question, but I just want to appreciate your time and the effort you have put in place for giving us all this information. I'm really grateful. I've learned a lot, and I'll go back and review everything. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Christabel. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. I wish you well on your journey and hoping that you get the most out of it and continue to stay patient, but also be persistent. All right. Have a good afternoon.